Hey guys, and welcome back to Hoosier Hardware. And while I was away on vacation, Valve kind of made a big announcement with the Steam Deck. And for those of you that did not see that announcement, basically what we have here is a handheld PC, very similar to the Aya Neo or something like the GPD Win 3. But there are some pretty big differences both in its actual physical layout as well as the accessibility to the general consumer. So today I want to go over some of my thoughts that I organized, the pros and cons, and just reasons to buy the Steam Deck if you are looking into this as an option for your next handheld system. First, to pay some bills with today's video sponsor, and that is the Coldest water. And I have a couple of their water bottles now, and they are fantastic. They're insulated water bottles. They have nice rubber grippy bits all over them so that you aren't gonna have a fly out of your hands. And the best part is the water inside of them, especially if you throw some ice in there, will literally stay cold all day long. They run rolling giveaways for one of their water bottles linked in the description down below. But if you're just looking to buy one of these things, code HH10 will get you 10% off of your order. All the information is in the description down below. So go and check that out if you're in the market for a fantastic water bottle. Now, as we get started today, make sure to hit that subscribe button down below for more content like this that regards news in tech or just generally PC tech. All those things are covered by the channel. And the other thing that I want you to do while you're down there is leave me a comment what you think about the Steam Deck right now, because this is a really exciting announcement that I think has a ton of potential. And I'm curious what you guys think. So the Steam Deck, let's start off with some of the pros that I really like to see with this Steam Deck, and specifically some of the things that just set it apart from some of the other options out there. Now, first and foremost, the specs, although often specs are a little bit overrated, when you get into the handheld market, getting the latest and greatest architectures into a handheld are actually really important, because those latest and greatest architectures give you the best opportunity to potentially play every single game on the PC library, at least all of the recent games, specifically AAA titles that are very difficult to run. It at least gives you an opportunity to get close to playing those. And yeah, in this regard, the Steam Deck is winning. Not so much on the CPU side, because the CPU side is using 4 cores and 8 threads on the Zen 2 architecture. That is not the latest and greatest on the CPU side of everything. But that's also not what's gonna be the bottleneck in the vast majority of situations. That's where the GPU is really important. This thing is running RDNA 2 graphics, similar to the way the newest consoles out right now are running RDNA 2 graphics, but every other APU out right now is still running Vega graphics. Well, this thing is a semi-custom solution, and it is gonna be running Zen 2 architecture on the CPU, but RDNA 2 on the graphics side of things. So hopefully you'll be able to play pretty much every Steam game out there, or really even other platforms in general, because Steam is not locking this down into its own proprietary software. You can install whatever you want on it, including other game stores altogether. So hopefully this thing will give you an opportunity to run pretty much everything out there, though I am a little bit concerned about games like Red Dead Redemption 2, Cyberpunk 2077, some of those very difficult to run games. This still may struggle with those. Another one of the things that I absolutely love about the Steam Deck, at least from the images, obviously I haven't had my hands on one of these things because pretty much no one has, but the controller layout is really, in my mind, smart. They have the normal controller layout that you would expect from a modern system. You've got bumpers, you've got triggers, you've got a couple of analog sticks, you've got a D-pad, 4 face buttons over yonder way, and then the brilliance of it, though, is twofold. First off, I love the touch pads being one on each side, because that opens up a lot of options for PC games. One of the hard things about making a handheld for the PC platform is a lot of games are made with mice in mind. Especially when you look at an entire genre like real-time strategy games, you almost need a mouse to function. And that's one of the few places that the Steam controller back when it was released and then subsequently flopped, it's one of the few things it got right was the touchpads that it did have allowed you to play pretty much every Steam game out there, or again, every PC game out there, not just limited to Steam. But this time around, the touchpads are not replacing one of the analog sticks, so I think that's the best balance for Valve to hit here. So I think they did a really good job there, provided that these touchpads actually are good touchpads. The other thing I love about the layout in general are the buttons on the back of the system being programmable. That again opens up a lot of options for PC titles that tend to be made with a keyboard in mind. You may be able to map a few extra actions to that. That may open up some nice possibilities, especially when you get into RPGs and different item usage with RPGs on the PC platform. Instead of using maybe your number keys to select an option or select an item, now you've got those buttons on the back of the system. So I think that's another really smart move that Valve made there. And the last thing that I want to highlight here as a major pro to this system is that we finally are getting a big name brand in the mobile handheld PC space, something that we really haven't seen up to this point. And with that big brand name, we get a big brand price. Whereas before we were working with Indiegogo pages and these smaller companies that are, frankly, probably purchasing their parts at a higher cost because they're purchasing less of them. They're not getting the same bulk discount a large company may get by producing tons of these things. So instead of something like the GPD Win 3 or the Aya Neo costing $700 or $800 on the low end, now we're looking at the low end price of just $400. Now, it's not the one that I would actually purchase because it comes with no NVMe drive whatsoever and the storage is very limited. But if you're just looking for a box to run pretty much any emulated game from retro consoles that you can possibly think of, this thing is plenty powerful enough to run all of those old emulators. So maybe that is the option for you. But if you're looking for a handheld PC that is also going to be able to run AAA games and also actually store the AAA games on fast NVMe drives, then you're going to be looking at about $530 for the 256 gigabyte one, or the $650 for the 512 gigabyte NVMe one. Now there are a few concerns that I do have with this system. The first and foremost one is one that is a completely temporary one, and that was the reservation system that Valve used for basically pre-ordering these things without actually having to pay up front. You had to pay a $5 reservation fee, and that was a complete mess on the day that those were actually available. I was not able to get my reservation in for quite some time, so my estimated shipping date is Q2 of 2022. So it's going to be a long wait for me to get my hands on one of these things, though if you are one of the early people, you may get it as soon as Christmas of this year or possibly in Q1 of 2022. The reservation system just was not in good shape, and I suspect it's because there was just more demand than maybe Valve had anticipated. And lastly, I want to swing back around to the big brand competition entering the space. That would be Valve, obviously. The downside to this is these smaller companies were really the pioneers of the handheld PC game. They innovated to the point where we were just starting to see some of these handhelds that could actually get close to playing AAA modern titles. The Aya Neo and the GPD Win 3 were both excellent systems, actually are both excellent systems. My concern is those companies and others are now going to have a major barrier to entry with such a big player in this space. It's going to be really hard for a company to come in and compete with the Steam Deck because frankly, the pricing is extremely aggressive, maybe even borderline predatory in some cases. But the thing is, Valve doesn't have to make money on this particular handheld PC. They just have to get kind of close to breaking even because the anticipation is people will then be funneled to the service and be more likely to buy more games from Steam itself, especially because it is shipping with Steam OS. So it's already gonna have Steam ready to go with it. Everything is gonna be fully integrated with it. It should be a pretty seamless sort of interaction with the handheld PC if you're using that Steam OS, though I think it is a little bit dubious because we're talking about a Linux-based distribution here, and Linux in gaming hasn't always been the smoothest thing. So we're gonna see how this all pans out in the future with, does this drive developers to actually support Linux natively, or are those compatibility layers that SteamOS is running gonna be enough to make consumers happy? Now for my part, I fully plan on getting one of these things in my hand and then running Windows on it, because I am very dubious of the idea that Linux is gonna let me have that perfect gaming experience across all my titles. Obviously though, time will tell. And finally, a few reasons that you may want to look into buying a Steam Deck. The first one off the top of my mind is you're looking to play retro titles through emulation, and you're looking for a handheld that can play like anything without stutters, glitches, no problem at all. This is a handheld that is fully capable of doing that with pretty much any good emulator out there. Now the downside to some of the handhelds that are basically emulation machines is that they often struggle with more demanding games, especially when you get into the Nintendo 64 era and then on. A lot of handhelds that are currently out on the market really struggle with emulating those games because they're just more demanding games. This thing has plenty of power to emulate probably GameCube and PlayStation 3 maybe, or possibly even more recent emulation. This thing has power for days. It's modern PC architecture on x86, so you might actually have a fighting chance to emulate whatever you want. Another use case that I actually really am excited about is it looks like it could be an excellent HTPC, especially if you're willing to pick up that dock to go with it, where you could put it down on the dock connected to a TV. You have your HTPC then, possibly you have something like a wireless keyboard and trackpad combination plugged into the dock at all times, and then when you're ready to just get up and go, you just grab your handheld off the dock and away you go. I see a lot of potential in that realm. And finally, another good reason to look at this is you have a ton of PC games, but you're not necessarily looking to play the latest and greatest and most demanding games all of the time, in which case a Steam Deck makes a lot of sense. Or an alternative to that is you already have an excellent battle station at home and you're looking to be able to take your PC games on the go. Basically, the Steam Deck is a very aggressively priced handheld PC that I think has a ton of potential if Valve follows through, and the big if here is if the hardware is good, because ultimately if the hardware is terrible, even if it looks good in pictures, it looks good in media, if the hardware is terrible, then it will probably eventually flop. Though I see a ton of potential for this, I'm very excited to see if this thing takes off, and I think it has a lot of positives that it could contribute towards the Linux gaming community in particular. If this thing takes off and developers start to see that SteamOS is doing really well, then they might start taking a little bit more time to develop for Linux natively and not rely on compatibility layers. Those are just my thoughts though. Of course, I want to hear from you guys. Let me know in your comments down below. Are you getting a Steam Deck? Are you excited about it? Are you disappointed by the announcements? Just give me all your thoughts down below. And of course, if you liked the video, give it a like, share, subscribe, and comment. All those things are very helpful for the channel. You can follow me both on Instagram and on Twitter at Hoosier Hardware. And as always, I'll let YouTube queue up a couple more videos from my channel for you to watch. I'm Shane with Hoosier Hardware, and I'll see you guys in the next video.